Hi, guys. We haven't seen Robert for a while, actually, since July. So it's been quite a few months, and I started getting withdrawals from not having conversations with Robert. So, Robert, so nice to see you back on this little platform.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. I always enjoy talking with you and seeing you and hearing about your fascinating life and your new dog, Ted. Ted or Teddy?
Ted.
Ted, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just Teddy.
congratulations.
Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah,
He's,
congratulations.
thank you. He's a cutie. He's a cutie.
Yeah, yeah.
So a shock to the system is like having a baby all over again.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to say something blasphemous. I really don't like puppies. Well, I like other people's puppies, but I really don't like puppies that much. Um, and I've had 8 dogs, and most of them have come to me when they're older than a puppy. I've had a couple of puppies, but
Yeah, no, I would
you
imagine
know.
as cute as they are, they're hard work. And I think that having an older dog is so much nicer. Hey, it
Yeah.
is what it is. Anyway,
When
enough about
when I
me.
say older, I mean like a year.
Yeah, well, that's
Oh,
still
okay,
busy.
right.
Yeah, that's
Or
still,
5,
yeah.
so
But Robert, a lot of
yes,
new listeners that might
yes.
not even have listened to the other chats I've had with you. So,
Hmm.
for the new listeners, could you just let them know a little bit about you and what you do?
Um, I just do this job. I do psychic readings, and I've been doing it for a while, and I'm just a plain ordinary everyday kind of psychic. I don't use a medium per se. Usually when I do readings, I just talk to the person. And that's usually how it goes. Um, that's pretty much how I see myself, really.
But that's not all you do. Remember the last time you told us about not the FBI, but that situation in the hotel?
Oh, well, that was part of the job. That's part of being the plain, ordinary, everyday kind of psychic as well. But I did at one time do service to for my country with in the security service, working as a psychic, and I had direct contact with a Soviet KGB agent, and I also found what they called in those days dead letter boxes, and a dead letter box is where they pass information or intelligence. And during the Cold War, the the border between Niagara Falls, Canada, and Niagara Falls, United States, the border there was more intelligence passed than anywhere else in the world. And every month for a couple of years, I went down to Niagara Falls, and I'd go into the station and look at maps of the area. And now that area, that the crossing over Niagara Falls between Canada and the United States, there isn't just one bridge. There's I think 3 different uh, locations where you can cross over. It's not from one country to the other, not
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
not
So
from one
border
not
crossing.
from one. Yes, that's right. Not from one world and life to another. The crossing is only from one country. Yeah, so they're border crossings, and as well as um, um, the I think it's the Niagara River. I think. So there's Lake Ontario, and there's Lake Erie, and then between them is the Niagara Falls, and there's a river. Um, and it's very easy to get across that. It's well, certainly not swimming where the falls are, but it's not really a super long swim from one country to the other in that river. You would have to be a good swimmer, but it, you know, it's doable. So what I would do is look at maps of the area, and then later on, after looking at the maps, then we would go out to the park areas or where that I was looking, and look for and find the dead letterboxes.
So
And
you would actually say, this is where it is.
well, I took them to it. I went to it. So we'd look at the map. No, we'd look at the map, right? And then I would go out and go to the spot and find it.
So would they fly you to the area to actually get there?
Niagara Falls from Toronto is about 125 kilometers.
So how would you get there?
Drive.
Oh, you just drove there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, in those days, I might have taken a bus.
And then they just looked after you on that side?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you would get in there. Would they have an unmarked car, or would they go in a police car? How would it work?
They had in the security service, they went to work in a suit, and they didn't carry guns. They had they had expense accounts, but they didn't have a gun. What they did is they watched what was going on. That's what they did. Now, do you know how that happened? Like finding the dead letterboxes. Do you know how that happened?
No.
Oh, okay. So the way that happened is now we're talking about in the mid 1970s, and I was I was 25, around that age. And in those days there were no networks, and when you went on a radio show, it was body in the studio. It was none of this like what we're doing right now. But in those days, you had to travel to the radio station, and I was the first traveling performing Canadian psychic. I was the first one that started going town to town to town, or city to city to city in Canada. And
But
Canada's
just to interrupt you there, how would you let people know that you were going to be there and what you were going to be doing? How did you market yourself in those days?
well, I went on radio stations.
Oh, you just went to the radio. You didn't put in a newspaper or?
No. I would just go on a radio show, do an open line, and the open line calls, and there was nobody else really doing that in those days. I was, and I would just book an appearance. So I have from a relatively early age, I was around broadcasting, and I was quite exuberant about being a psychic, and I let lots of people know, and I got interviewed a whole lot on radio and on TV as early as in the 1970s. As I said, I was one of the very first Canadians to do that, and then I started doing call-in show. Okay. Then I started doing call-in shows and in the area. And then I started going to other areas and expanding out. And
but how did you get payment for that, for the work that you did?
Hold on. So what I would do is I would go to the radio station, wherever it was, and I would have a hotel room, and from about in the 70s, in the 78, 76, 77, 78, I then started traveling with a full-time secretary, and so I'd go to the city, go on a radio station, do open line calls, and do that. And then I say, listen, if you'd like to have a reading from me, you can see me at the Chateau Laurier, call there. and then we would go from city to city or town to town. So
So would you
I
do your
was
readings in your room?
well, I always had a suite.
So you'd
Yes.
have a suite, you'd go into the lounge of your
And my
suite.
and my second, no, not to the lounge, to the radio station, and do open line shows.
Yes, but when you were having your personal, if you said, look, if you'd like a reading, this is where I'm at.
Yes, they would
So
come to
then,
the hotel.
so how would they
Yeah.
make a booking if suddenly you've got 10 people all wanting a reading? Would they make an appointment?
Well, I had a
with
full-time,
your
no, I had a
secretary?
full-time secretary, and she would answer the phone and book the appointments.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and
So
then
that's logistics.
and then I would
Yeah.
do the readings,
Okay,
and
awesome.
then we'd do the readings, and then we'd go to the next city.
Okay, all right. So
Right,
you,
right.
so
And I went around the
you would do
world
it-
doing that.
So you would do it free on the radio station because they were like your
Well,
marketing people. They
they
would
paid
give
me.
people.
They in those days they paid me.
Oh, they paid you as well
Yeah, yeah.
because then they were getting a lot of customers because they were
Be-
interested in that.
Well, they were getting they were getting a lot of listeners. That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Awesome.
Right.
And then you'd go from place to place. So you not only were getting paid by the radio station, but then you and your secretary would make the appointments and you'd be able to see people privately and then you'd go on to the
Absolutely.
next place. Okay,
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
That's how it works. So I was auditioning for a radio show in Ottawa. So 1976, I guess. And I had to, oh, and by the way, at that time, without meeting the RCMPs, I had my own radio show on Sunday nights at CJRN Radio in Niagara Falls, Ontario. I went down to Niagara Falls every Sunday to do my own call-in show as a psychic, right?
Yeah.
And the theme song was "Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft."
Yes,
That-
David
that
Bowie.
song- Yeah,
David
well, that
Bowie.
was that was the intro to my show back in 1976. So once you had a spot on the station, you could call another station and say, "Hi, this is Robert Lindsay Milne from CJRN in Niagara," and then I would, I'd get an audition and I'd go. So on this particular time, I was going to the audition, and I just flew to Ottawa. It's not a long flight. It's less than an hour to Ottawa, and I then just went to the radio station, and then did the show, and then went back to. And by the way, I got the show. I appeared there every month for 12 years, and I just did the audition and then went back home, and same day. And a couple of days later, for anybody that's listening, Ottawa is the capital of Canada, and so I had been back a couple of days or a week or something, and I started getting phone calls from friends saying, "We've been getting." I got this call from so-and-so from the RCMP, and they're asking about you. And I'm thinking, oh shit, right? Like I don't like this. And this went on for about a week, 2-3 people called me. And then out of the blue, my place where I was working, where my office was, I got a phone call, and the man introduced himself as Sergeant from the RCMP Security Service, and he would like to meet with me and discuss a non-criminal. Oh, wrong. Well, I missed a lot. Okay, so when I got back, a few days after I'd been back, I got a phone call from the program director at the Ottawa radio station, and saying that this guy, and he gave his name, he says he's a Russian journalist and he works for TASS news agency, but he's got diplomatic passport. And he had heard me on the show, and he said he wanted to interview me. And I said to the program director, don't tell him where I live. Don't give him my phone number. I don't want anything to do with this guy. Leave me.
Because of the
Tell him-
Cold War and being
That's
Russian.
exactly right. I didn't
Yeah.
want to deal with any Russians. I didn't want to do that. I'm a a red-blooded Canadian, and I didn't want to deal with the enemy or the bad guys. And I just said, don't let them know anything about me. And that was back in the days when, if you wanted somebody's phone number, you had to look them up in the telephone book,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
and you don't get a national telephone book. It's for cities. So and there was no way to find my address or anything. So anyway, then the story with, then the RCMP, the program director called me. I said, don't give him any information. And that was that. And just after that, I started getting calls from friends saying, hey, this Mounties been checking me out. Yeah. So anyway, now he says, I'd like to, myself and my partner would like to meet with you and have about a non-criminal matter. And I said, does that have anything to do with the Russian guy from Ottawa? And he said, well, yes. And I said, I don't want anything to do with this. Leave me alone, please. All that happened is I went on a radio show and he heard it and he called the program director. And I said, don't let him contact me. That's all there is. And he said, well, could you just talk with us about that, please? And I said, I don't want to. And he said, you may be doing your country a good deed.
Is that when they put you up in that hotel that time and then you had the chat and it was like the defection or whatever?
That's correct.
Right. So that's how they got to know you, and then you worked.
That's how they got to know me.
Dead.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then after that, the guy called me. Yeah, because, they were listening to the reading I was doing for this guy. Like they had prepared me and they had, briefed me on his life. And I had in my mind what these guys had about this fellow. And, took about 3 minutes to realize that all the information they'd given me was wrong. And that was the first time and only time in my life I ever went into a reading with information and being prepped. So I just flipped to my own format and did a reading for him. Mm-hmm. And the guys the room I was in was wired, and they were hearing the stuff that I was doing, and they were pretty impressed. And then
so how long did you work with them afterwards for going
2
to
years.
the borders? 3 years.
2 years.
2 years. So why did that thing just stop? Did things ease between the nations?
No. I think the
or did they get to know that you were onto them and they had to use different areas?
No. I can't really remember what happened. It was something went on for a couple of years, and then I went on to other things. Maybe it wasn't that exciting after a while.
So Robert,
yes?
Can you know how the work that you do, that I do, they always stand out situations or memories and you go, wow, that was incredible. What are the ones that you can share with us so that people can see the kind of things that you deal with?
Okay, so I am a psychic and I do readings. And I do readings, and that's the main part of my life, the main part of my work. It's been exciting. I over my lifetime, I started working at a tea room. I was 15 and a half. In January, I celebrate 58 years of being a professional psychic, and my job has been doing readings and, connecting. along the line, I've had many opportunities to do things with my abilities that I didn't know that I could do. And I'm still doing stuff like that. And I will get just pulled off doing readings for a day or two. But I'll be doing something different, okay, so when I first started traveling, touring, I didn't have very much money. So there's this little city just north of Toronto called Barrie, Ontario. And it was the best city for me to go to anywhere in the world. Like reading for reading, dollar for dollar, it was the most successful one, because it's about 100 kilometers north of Toronto. I would drive up there in the morning early, and I would check into a hotel. And then I'd be by myself. Then I would go to the radio station, do an open line show and say, hey, if you want to have a reading from me, I'm going to be here in town today and tomorrow. And you can find me at the Bayshore Inn. So give me a call. Then I'd, run like hell or drive like crazy back to the hotel. I'd answer the phone. I'd book a whole bunch of readings, and then I would do them. I would do like 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 that day, and the next morning do another 10, and then check out. So I would drive up there, pay for one night in the hotel. All I would have to do is pay for gas, and I would, do 15 or 20 readings, and I would have that cash, and that would get me to the next city when we could start the tour. Yeah.
Robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah. And then there were times when I was just going up where I'd be going to I was going to the city, and I was booked on the TV station or the radio station, and they would promote me and stuff. Well, there were times when I would get to the city and I wouldn't have enough money to get in the hotel to pay for the first night. So I would say, sometimes I would not fly there, but take the train or something. And I'd get off the train and I would walk halfway to the hotel, or within a couple of blocks of the hotel. Then I'd flag a cab down, and the cab would take me. So they'd see me come up in a cab, and I would say, I'm Robert Lindsay Milne, and I'm with CKJD in Sarnia for the next couple of days, and I'm with with Rogers. I lost my wallet. I don't have any cash, but I will have money tomorrow. And they would let me in. And then the next day I'd go to the radio station and do a call-in show, and then run like hell back to the hotel and do a whole bunch, and then go on to the next city and the next city and the next city.
Isn't it? They must have been so stressful. Until you got enough to generate yourself. You were actually having to think on your feet, and maybe when you were so young and left home, and then were living on the streets as such, that you learned how to read life so that you could think quickly like that in order to be able to do what you did.
Well, maybe, sure. I never thought of that.
Street skills.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it wasn't stressful. It was just the way it was done.
Just the way it was.
But the next day I had a pocket full of money, so it didn't matter.
So tell us, because I know that the audience that are listening, they actually want to know all about the readings. And
okay, can I talk about
standout stuff?
Okay, so when I had been working at the Tea Room at like 15 and a half, and I worked there for till I was about 21. And it was, well, this work has been a life commitment, and in many ways not a sacrifice, but I lived differently than a lot of people to do this work. And neither I'm not complaining or bragging. It's just the way it was. And remember,
But you
it was
left your, sorry to interrupt you, you did lose a family member through it because your father wasn't happy with what you were doing. So there was a price to pay.
I was rejected by
Yes.
a lot of my blood family for what I
Yes.
was doing.
I want the
Uh,
audience to know that this happens to a lot of us.
Yeah, I didn't care.
You carried on anyway.
Well, I learned at a really young age that, well, see, I don't care if somebody believes in being psychic or not. I don't care. And another thing is that I don't care if somebody has a reading with me or not. Now, when they decide to have a reading and book the reading, then I care very deeply. But
Yes.
I don't care if somebody books or doesn't book, and I don't care if they believe or they disbelieve. And my thinking is very simple. It's impossible to describe the color orange to somebody who's blind from birth.
I love that.
Well, it's yours. Use it. So they're not capable or willing to be capable of seeing it. Okay,
So why
next.
get upset about it? There's no point
Well,
in getting
yeah.
upset, right?
Well, that's right. It's like
So we
getting
have
angry.
expectation. Yeah.
It's like getting angry at somebody who's blind that can't see.
Yeah. Waste of time.
Well, that's right. So, and I learned that really young
I
in
think
life.
that's great that you learned that so young, because
Well, just because I had literacy problems and you know, and I still do, it doesn't mean I was stupid. I just had because of certain traumas and you know, DNA. I have PTSD and I have ADHD, and before it was invented, and a couple other things because of, you know, the things that I went through. I'm not quite sure why I talked about this.
because of acceptance and everything else, and how you got to read life.
Yeah.
You might not have read literally.
Absolutely.
But
Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. So I was I'm a pretty smart person. I was able to figure, you know, stuff out. I just couldn't write it.
Yeah, but it was incredible that you could do that at such a
But
young age. It was a survival thing for you. Look how you survived on the streets.
yes.
That was, when you held that dying man in your hands that had just been murdered. To me, that was such a huge thing. Of course, you would have what is it called?
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
No wonder you would have that. I mean, there was a man murdered in front of you as such, and holding him while he's dying, and then being hauled off thinking that you were the one that would have murdered him, and then finding out, no, it's not you, and then sending you straight back to your parents in school, but no counseling, absolutely nothing, and you were a child. Like, have you ever had help for that, Robert?
I've been in therapy since I was about 16 years old. And last February, I graduated. It's the first time since I was in my mid-teens that I haven't been doing some type of therapy or work on myself, healing the wounds that I have. It's been a I've spent my life doing it. And
life journey.
Yes, that's right. Now the thing is, I have spent my life helping myself, healing myself, and in turn, in my work, I teach people how to heal themselves. So what I had went through is what getting past it is what I started doing for other people and showing them the way and how. Our way, not the way. There's always 100 ways. Well, maybe not 100, but there's a lot of ways. So I was able to still show people other ways of dealing with things or how to deal with things.
Because you'd
And
experienced it yourself. And so you were one step ahead. All you had to be is one step ahead in order to help.
Absolutely. So I just felt that I deserved chance to work on myself, and I have done that, and now I'm not actually ever going to be finished, doing work on me. I just, for the first time since I was about 16, I took a break, not with the same therapist, but I've had like lots. So and it's really helped me with my work, and I've learned a lot there. So we're jumping all over the
But it's
place.
okay.
Just let me
That's what
think.
I do. My
Okay,
mind goes like that.
okay.
Maybe I'm
Well, let me just get
ADHD.
so. I also was the first performing psychic on radio and TV in Canada. I was the first one to do that. I was that pioneer. And back in those days, telephones were that's all we had for communication. And in those days, nobody did psychic readings on the phone. Nobody had heard of doing psychic readings on the phone. And I was living at that Fleabag Hotel, and during one time I was working in it. I was at that hotel, at the Fleabag Hotel, and I worked on the front desk 4 nights a week, in exchange for room and board. And that was, really the first time in my life that I had the security of a place to live and food, and not have to worry about, getting money for rent or food or things like that. So I had it opened up a lot of opportunity, but again, I was still doing lots of readings. And but a lot of my clients, they were ladies of the evening and their friends and drug addicts and street people, and they were my clients. And one day I was sitting in my room, and I was looking around and looking at how I was living, and I just said, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to live like this. If I'm going to do this, I have to have a decent life.
And you made
If
that
not,
decision that day. It just culminated to that
it
point.
had been building.
Yeah.
It had been building. And as I looked around, I just thought, this is not what I have in mind for me. And I then thought, okay, one of the things also that I did is I said, I made a deal with the universe. And I said, if I'm going to do this work, I have to live well. And if I'm not going to live well, I'm not doing the job. And the universe has kept its share, its side of the deal. So I am a long way away from being rich, but I have always had
Enough.
I've always had a good living. I've always had a good standard.
So you've had
Um,
shelter and you've had food and you've had
and
clothes.
and I've always, that's right, and I've always, and you know, I've given away most of what I've made in my life, you know, just sort of just the way it happens. But I always am taken care of. I always have a really nice place. I always have you know, things, and it's not really my great interest.
Yeah, I can see that you're not a materialist. That's not what drives you at
But I
all.
have lots of material things, but you know, if I lose something, it's fine. Next, but
Yeah.
so I've always lived well. So I was at the hotel, and as much as I loved the ladies of the evening, etc., for my clients, they were not the clients that I wanted, or exclusively anyway. And I was thinking, what can I do? How can I get people? And I thought, I wonder if I could do readings on the telephone. I actually, you know, I wonder, could I do readings on the telephone? And there's one way to find out.
Give it a go.
And to pick up the phone and call somebody. And in the hotel that I was at, it was one of these, they had this old fashioned plug-in keyboard. So you had to pick the phone up and the desk clerk would dial the phone number. So, and I got everything at the hotel. I got, you know, I could actually go into the hotel kitchen and cook dinners and stuff for me and friends. And then I I had my room, or my sitting room. I had to pay for phone calls, and they were like 25 cents. That was a lot of money. 25 cents was a lot of money in those days. People were making, you know, $50 a week. So, you know, a quarter for a phone call, or 10 phone calls was a lot. So I would, you know, get the guy, the desk clerk that was on, I would call one of my friends, and I just practiced doing readings. And I then you know, called other friends and practiced over and over and over again. And then I asked my friends if they had friends that I could call, and I started doing that. Well, the people knew that I was calling, and that went on for about 6 or 7 months. And then I just put my phone number out there and said, hey, if you want a psychic reading, you know, call Robert at Larry's Hideaway. And you know, the calls would come in. It'd be like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd be sleeping. I'd say, you know, hello. I would go from awake to, I said, hello, who is it? And the guy said, hey, it's Joe. What can you tell me? You know, and I just wake up and go and you know, do the readings. And that went on for about a year.
How on earth do you get paid money?
You're one sentence ahead of me.
Fast mind, fast.
So there I was, doing that, and then I said to myself, how do you get the money? That's exactly what I did. And I thought, well, nobody was gonna, no credit cards in those days were anything, were not ubiquitous. In fact, almost nobody had one. And any of the credit card companies weren't going to let me be a merchant. So I thought, Then I thought, if I can do readings for someone on the telephone, I wonder if I can do readings on the telephone, on the radio. I wonder. And again, there's only one way to find that out, right? Is go do that. And there's another.
But weren't you already doing that? You were on the radio when they were calling in.
That was I'm talking about when I'm 22,
Oh,
23,
before that.
25 years old.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So it was
Oh
like,
yeah, I'm back there.
okay, so I'm backtracking. Okay,
Yeah.
this was then, and then
Yeah.
you realized if I
Yeah.
can do this like that, then I can do it on the radio, and
Well,
that's how that
that's
took off.
not that's oh, sorry, that's not the way I said it. What I said was, I wonder if I can do readings on the telephone. Could I do readings on the telephone on the radio?
Why not?
Well, remember, there weren't very many psychics that were public those times. It wasn't talked about or anything. So I was my own teacher.
But that was brave, Robert.
Oh, where did I tell you this? Where did I tell you the story? So I had this girlfriend in Toronto. Her name was Virginia, and she came from this small town north of Toronto called Orillia. And they have this little wee radio station there. It was either CJOR or CFOR. One of them is the radio station in Orillia, and the other one is a radio station in Vancouver, CF or CJOR, either one. So I phoned the radio station and said, "Hi, my name is Robert Lindsay Milne, and I'm a psychic, and I can do this and this and this." And the guy said to me, "If you can do what you say you can do, you're on my show tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And if you can't do what you say you can do, you're off my show at 9:15. And then he said, "Other than that, come on up." And I said, "Okay." Aurelia is 120 kilometers north, maybe a little bit farther than Toronto.
And you didn't have money in those days to even get there.
I didn't have any money.
Yes.
I mean, zero,
yeah.
nothing. Okay.
Zilch.
And I was on a radio show 120 kilometers away in a small town. And that late afternoon, I hitchhiked to Aurelia. And there's a Lake Couchiching that Aurelia is on. And there's a beautiful park. And that night I slept on the park bench. And the next morning I swam in the lake for my bath, my grooming. And in those days, oh, by the way, Rusty Draper is his name, was the program director's name, but it was such a small station. He was also the program director, the morning man, and the morning talk show host as well. And they were doing and broadcasting the talk show from Howard Johnson's hotel in Aurelia, from the dining room.
Oh, wow.
So, and that was because Howard Johnson's having trouble getting people to come to their restaurant in the town. So,
and
anyway,
you must have looked like a hippie arriving. They would say, "Who the hell are you?"
Oh, well, do you think, eh? Well, having slept on a bench and swam in the lake as well, right? And when I got to the hotel, I'm saying I'm the CFOR or CJOR. I'm looking for Rusty Draper or something like that. A couple of people looked at me. I wasn't sure if they were going to let me in the place. So I go into the restaurant, and there's like nobody there, except technicians putting yeah. And, I say who I am. And anyway, Rusty shows up, and there's still nobody in the place except for the microphone and the broadcast. So we go on the air, and Rusty starts asking me a couple of questions. And then he says, "So if you're so psychic, tell me something about me." And I said to him, "I'm thinking of a man with red hair and a name like Jackson. No, sorry, a name like Richardson." And he looked at me and said, "You're not supposed to know that." And he just changed the subject. And then he said, "Well, if you're so psychic, let's see you do some calls." And they didn't do call in. They didn't have psychics do that then in those days. This was like I was, doing something different. Anyway,
Innovative.
people called in, and I started, I got on a kind of roll, and the show was on from 9 to 10. At about 10:15, people started coming to the hotel and started
Ooh,
coming into the restaurant.
filling up
And
the
then they
dining
were
room.
and then they started coming to the table and I was doing readings for them live in there, for people live. And then I was doing calls as well. And then by about 20 to 11, 20 to 10, the entire restaurant was full. And at 10 to 11,
Were they ordering
oh,
food?
drinking and eating, and people are running around, and I'm just doing my thing. And then at about 10 to 10, Rusty says, "Can you stay an hour longer?" And I said, "Sure." I'd never done this before. Like, I was 25, 24. I was, really, energetic and stuff. So sure, I'll do. Sure. So they go to news, and then at 10 o'clock, we start again. At just a little after 10, there are people out in the hallway now lining up. And now after about a half an hour, then they empty the restaurant and fill it up again. And I'm just going, so, and it's just all a blur, and it's wonderful. And then at about 10 to 11, Rusty says, "Can you stay on another hour?" And I
You said,
said,
I need some
"Sure."
lunch or some breakfast.
Well, I didn't think about, I was, when I'm doing readings, I really don't eat very much. And
I was
when I'm
thinking
on
you didn't
tour,
even have breakfast. You had no money. So you'd come on, you'd slept
right,
that
well,
night, you had no dinner, you had no breakfast, and then you were just on high energy.
survival. So anyway, at 10 to 11, he says, "Can you do another hour?" And I say, "Sure." And then that goes on. And at about quarter to 12 or 20 to 12, I just sort of looked over at him, and I just said, "I can't
Okay.
do anymore. So we have to stop at noon." And he said, "Okay." So as the show ends, I was just in a whole space that I'd never quite experienced. And it was, it was glorious, but I was, I was tired and spacey, and it was, I was really having trouble sort of grasping all that had gone on. And when the show was over, people just rushed the stage, and I just got circled, I just could hardly handle it. And Rusty and the hotel owner came up, and one guy grabbed me by one arm and the other guy grabbed me by the other arm, and they pulled me away, and we got into the manager's office. And Rusty said to me, "Could you stay over and do another show tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, no, I can't. The truth be," I said, "I slept in the park last night. I swam in Lake Couchiching. I haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon, and I'm tired and I'm hungry and I just want to go home." And the owner of Howard Johnson said, "Well, we can take care of that. Your food. Could you stay over?" And Rusty then said to me, he said, "If you stay here, and you come on the show, do you do readings for people?" And I said, "Yes." And in those days, I charged $5. And I said, "Yes, I do readings." And he said, "Well, we could get one of the girls at the station to book appointments for you." And then he said, "How much do you charge?" And I said, $25. And he said, "You'll," and he said, "You," he said to me, he said, "You'll never get that here." And I said, "I don't care."
Yeah.
Because I was staying at Howard Johnson's, I had free access to everything, the bar, the restaurant. I had my own room. I had like a beautiful room, better, the nicest room I'd ever been in my life.
Better than the Fleetwood Hotel.
Huh? Yeah, better. Yeah, yeah. If I didn't get paid or didn't get any readings, didn't matter, because I was okay. Anyway, the next day I did a show. Oh, and the owner of the hotel said that if anybody booked appointments, I could stay as long as I needed to do the readings.
Wow.
They booked 125
Readings
appointments.
at $25 each. You must have thought, what on earth has just happened? You'd actually achieved something that you'd thought about. You didn't know how it was going to go. It went so well.
Well, you haven't heard the rest.
Rusty must have thought, what the?
Well, yeah. I started doing readings, and
How do they pay you? Do they pay you cash or put it
well,
in?
how else could they have paid me
in those days?
Yeah, right. And so I had no expenses, and I was there 11 days, and I did 125 readings in cash, and I had never seen so much money in my life. It was just unbelievable. And throughout that week, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm not going to be hitchhiking home.
Whoop-de-doo.
So the next thing I said to myself is, okay, I could take the bus. And then the wad got bigger, and I said, well, okay, I could take the train. And then, and then a day or two later, the wad got even big, so big I couldn't keep it in my pants. I had to hide it. There was so much, I just couldn't believe it. And so I thought, okay, I could take the train, and then I could fly home. So I phoned Air Canada. They didn't fly from Aurelia. So I phoned Aurelia Airport, and I asked, did they have any charter flights to Toronto?
I love it.
And they did.
Big deal.
And I did all those readings, checked out of the hotel, and then I took a cab to the airport and chartered a single engine Cessna and flew back to Toronto, and it landed at Toronto Island Airport. It's right in the heart of the city. And I got off the plane, took a cab back to Larry's hotel, Larry's Hideaway.
You were in the Fleabag Hotel.
Of course, well, that's where I had lived for which, hold on. So then I went to
your room. They kept your room.
Well,
yeah, away for a few days.
Of course, they didn't have. Yeah, I was a good worker. So anyway, when I got back, I went to I went to my room, and then I went to the restaurant across the street, and I got a newspaper, and I looked in now this went on over about a week, 2 weeks. I got a newspaper, and I looked in apartments for rent, furnished apartments for rent, and I took a cab to this place near St. Clair, it was at St. Clair Avenue Road, which is a real nice neighborhood. And I went in, I saw this furnished 1-bedroom apartment, and I paid 6 months rent in advance. And then I took a cab back to Larry's Hideaway, and I put whatever I could put in the cab. Anything I couldn't make it in the cab, I just left, and I went back to that. Place, and pardon, and I didn't go back to Larry's Hideaway again for several years after that. And at the time, while I was at Larry's, I also had gotten involved with an organization called Mind Dynamics, which was just around the corner from where I had lived. It was 191 Avenue Road, and that was how my life changed. That's how I did it.
Just because you set that intention and you
Yeah, of
told the
course.
universe, this is how it's going to be if I'm going to be doing this work. So
Yeah.
that takes me on to something else, is that your work has changed again. You know, when I first interviewed you and you said, you know, I could do this as well. I said, absolutely. And look how you've taken off, right? You've got all these interviews. I would love to know how that is. Has it changed you in any way, or your thinking, everybody that you've met and their stories?
Um, I've always known I was pretty good at my job. I never realized this good, and it's quite humbling.
Mm.
It really is.
But look at these amazing souls that you've met now.
It's quite humbling.
Oh, Robert.
It's um you know, I jokingly say, you know, like I turned 74 next July. Yeah, you know, so, and in January is like 58 years that ago that I went to the tea room and started working there. And after leaving Larry's, well, I was successful as a kid doing readings at the tea room. And anytime I worked as a psychic or a reader or a helper or an intuitive, or anytime I've done that, I've done well. And there's always been lots of people to work with. And I've always worked mostly by myself. And I'm not sure why I was talking about this. What was your question again?
Because I was just saying, I know that you've been interviewing people.
With my podcast.
And have anything that they've said surprised you?
No.
You've been
That's the other thing. That's the other thing that has blown me away. Because I've always worked on my own. You know, I'm always, you know, I've always been
Lone Ranger.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't like competing. And when I was around other psychics, and even now today, there's always a competition. Especially in the old days, it's always competitive. Well, I'm not competitive, which is why I work on my own, but others resent what I've done
It's
or
just
my.
their own inadequacies, though. Have you
Well, I
ever had
don't
a
see
reading?
I don't care about that.
Yeah,
It's that I just don't like to be around it.
yes, I agree with you.
Right. So I didn't hang around very many psychics. So I'm learning about what I've already learned. And I've learned that I'm a whole lot better than I actually realized. And I'm aware that I know so much more than I even realized that
That
I
you
know,
thought you knew. It's
that
just
I
a
thought I
knowing.
know.
It's a knowing
Absolutely.
inside, right?
And since I've been, first of all, going on podcasts, I think I'll be on like around 40 podcasts this year by the end of the year, other people's podcasts. And it's not just knowing as being a psychic, it's knowing things because of the 100,000 psychic connections that I've had, knowing things because I've had like 50 plus years experience, that type. And when also my training, you know, I have had training, you know, since even being in a tea room, I've been guided or trained or, you know, directed to different places. And in part of my, so I don't have, you know, people want to know what I do. Am I a channeler? Am I a medium? Am I a psychic? Am I a, I don't know, and I don't care.
It's
I'm not,
labels.
they're just labels. And whether I'm a clairsentient or whether I'm a telepath or whether I'm an empath, I don't care. What I'm interested in is doing the job. But what I've also learned is there was another time where I had a lot of training with that place at, you know, the New Mind Dynamics, the New Age Center, and I
Was that
learned
the
a
life
whole.
coaching?
No, no, I do life coaching now. No, this was still in the 70s, and they taught a mind school type course plus all the spiritual things that people were doing around there at that time, and I learned how to do things. You know, you do a meditation and they would say, okay, you know, let your mind go to such and such a place. Can you see the rose, smell the rose? And well, that's remote viewing. But we learned how to do that just because let your mind go to it. They don't put any name on it. I just do it. And there were so many things that I learned during that time that didn't have a name to it. We just did it because and when I would find a lost person the first time I gave it a try, or when I was working with somebody in a coma, I didn't think about what technique I was going to use. I just did it.
Yeah.
There was one time some people came to me, they were from South America. And when they got to Canada, just before they left for Canada, their father went away to sell their car. He never came home. They never found the car. And these people came to me for a reading. One of them did. And she mentioned about her father and what had happened. And she said, can you tell me anything about it? No, this is something that happened 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, okay. And I just did it. I just went back 20 years. And that was the first time I tried to do that. Now, I also said, you know, I've got other people that I need to see today. So if you can come back, it was, you know, in a couple of days from now, and you can bring your mother or whatever. And the family came that night. And I just sat down and visualized all that happened to the guy and the things that I was saying that they could, you know, like the color of the car and, you know,
knew that they knew that you knew that it was the right person because of what you were telling them.
That's correct. That's correct. Now, I didn't know that was remote viewing. I just
but
did
that
it.
To me is just channeling. So
all right, whatever it is.
What see
for me,
what does it matter?
Well, absolutely. See, that's the point. That's my point. But nobody was doing that in those days.
But you started this conversation by saying you're just an ordinary psychic. Robert, I don't think there's anything ordinary about you.
Really?
I actually think you are an exceptional psychic. And you were a trendsetter, such you were a way shower. You led the way and opened it up for others to say, if I can do this, you can as well. And you've never had that competitive streak. And I think that it's almost like you were incarnated to be the way shower, to go through the trauma that you've gone through in order then to help so many, because you have that compassion. So it's not just saying, oh, I feel sorry for you. You don't have sympathy, you have empathy, because you know what they're going through. And I think that is what just brings it out, such a stronger, more fabulous person.
Anything I can do, other people can do. I'm not special.
They don't,
well, that's
no,
their issue,
but
but
they don't and they
I'm not,
can't. Some of them
I'm
can't.
not, okay, I'm not special. I just do what I just do it. Other people can do it too. But there's other things that happen to me as well. So
So what is it that you want to share? What is it that you
okay, here's
feel
another one. Here's another
impor-
thing that
important for you for people to know
about what
about you?
I
About you and some of those really special things, like you've told us about the sort of FBI, so Canadian police kind of thing, and those dead boxes. What do they call them?
dead letter boxes.
A dead letter
The way
box.
you said
Okay.
it, it sounded like a coffin.
And then you've told us about this guy now, and what happened to him then? What did you tell the family?
What had happened is, once again, they gave one of the reasons I don't want to talk with people before I do their reading, because I don't want them to tell me things, because it influences me. So
Yes.
this was an incident. They told me that he had the car, he was driving to the border of another country in South America. And then he was going to fly home, and he and they implied, or I heard, that the army was involved and things like that. And so I started sensing what had happened to him. Well, what happened to him? They stole the car from him and they killed him. But what also happened is they told me that he would get on an airplane. So while I was just talking with him, I said he never went to an airport. He didn't fly anywhere. And then I said, there were soldiers, but they looked really different. They were wearing khaki pants. They weren't wearing proper uniforms, but they were wearing like khaki pants, and they were wearing shirts, and they had the gun belts, or the bullet belts around their shoulders and stuff, and they were wearing hats, but they weren't wearing their uniform.
They were
And
guerrilla soldiers.
that's right. They weren't soldiers at all, but the family told me that the army was involved, and I called them army because they told me that. Anyway, we worked out that the car had been stolen,
He was murdered.
and he was murdered. Yeah.
So Robert, have you ever tried, like when you were in the hotel that time and you said, if I'm going to do this work, I have to have a proper living. I have to live differently.
Mhm.
So by setting the intention and changing your life, I
Mhm.
believe that that's all, we have the power to do that. Have you ever at any stage said, there's that guy that's been murdered. I'd like to have a conversation with him and
I'm
see how
sorry, what? I'm sorry, what did you
the
just say?
chap that was actually murdered. Have you ever said that you would like to work with the people who actually have deceased?
No.
No. So like Michelle, for example, who does that?
Mhm. Yeah, well,
You,
I'm not
you've never
interested
done
in it.
that. So you do your speciality.
Well, I
But you
just
could
do
do it
things.
then. You've
Well,
just said
maybe
that
I so,
everybody.
so yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yes, I could. Yes, I can do it. I don't want to do it. I'm not interested in
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Um,
So just
I like
choice.
um sometimes immediate gratification is a little too slow for me, you know. So I like to see the results of my work, rather than I like to see what I do. I like to see how things turn out. I like a hands-on approach. So I was going to tell you as well, with that man in the alleyway that got killed.
Yes.
Um, that was the beginning of a whole series of incidences in my life where I've been around people um, that were in danger, and my influence kept them alive. I'll give you just one or two. In my office, it was at one time in Toronto, in Centertown, and this would have been in the early 2000s, and I was going to my dentist from my office, and the roads were really busy and traffic jam, so I decided to take the subway. And there were two ways to get to the dentist's office at Queen Street and Yonge Street. Get on the Bloor streetcar or the Bloor subway, take it east to Yonge Street, get on the Yonge Street southbound car, and take it straight down to Queen Street. Get off, and that's where my dentist is. The other way to get there is to get on the streetcar or the subway at Bloor and take it to a stop called St. George Street, and then get off at St. George, go downstairs, and then take a southbound train all the way down University Avenue, all the way around and up and at Queen. So it's an extra 6 or 7 stops. So usually I would always go, the shortest way.
Short way, yeah.
I don't know why, but on this day that I was going to see the dentist, as I was on the subway, I just decided that I was going to get off at St. George. I don't know why. I got off the subway at St. George and I went downstairs to the platform. On one side is northbound, one side is southbound. And as I get down, I see a train's in the station or in the platform, and it's getting ready to move. And I start to run to an open door, and I realize that the doors are going to close, and I just stopped. As the doors were starting to close, when I had stopped, this woman came running up behind me and then in front of me to get on the subway car. She put her foot inside the door, and the door closed on her foot, and the subway was starting to move. And I reached forward and put my hands around her shin and at the bottom near her ankle. And I pulled her foot out of her shoe. And then I pulled her back a little bit and I let go. And then her shoe was bouncing between the platform and the train as the train was leaving the station. And this woman bent down to pick up her shoe. And as she was doing that, the big space between the two cars, all of a sudden she was starting to do a header into the tunnel or into there. And again, I reached down, grabbed her by the waist this time, and I held her really tight and I pulled her back several steps and I let go. But as I was letting go, I heard this other train on the other side of the platform come into the station. And as I was letting go of the woman, I then realized that I was actually at the northbound platform and I really should have been at the southbound platform. So I just let go of her. And then, and as I was looking back, I saw some other people were holding her and, she was crying and all that kind of shit. And I was just sitting then I got on the subway and we went, 2-3 blocks or stops. And I just said, you just saved her life. That happens several times a year.
Wow. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I just moved recently. I moved to this neighborhood, First of Bay. I'd been in the neighborhood for a week, 2 weeks at the most. And one evening I went out. The name of the neighborhood is called Corso Italia, and it's right in the heart of the Italian section of Toronto. And I just want to brag, Toronto is the most culturally diverse city in the world, and we have the largest Italian population outside of Italy. And we've got lots of people, and if you call emergency 911 emergency service in Toronto, you will be spoken to in 100 different dialects. So anyway, that's my home. So it was Gesundheit. I just decided that this one night I wanted something different to eat, and I went out walking up and down the street looking for a restaurant that would get my attention. And I walked several blocks to the west on the north side, or the west side of the street. And I walked, and I couldn't find anything that was appealing. Then I crossed the street and I walked back the other way, and I still didn't find anything appealing. Then and where I live is very near the corner of Dufferin Street in St. Clair, and right at that corner is where there's a 7-Eleven store, which is like a confectionery store. And I just decided I wasn't going to find anything interesting, so I just go to the 7-Eleven and see what I could get there. And I came out, and the way I needed to get home was I just needed to turn left, take about 3 steps, and then turn left again and walk south to where I live. And it might be at most 150 meters away from the main street. And as I was walking down the street, it wasn't very far, I noticed that there was a man lying on the ground, and he was unconscious. And I looked at him. And by the way, people had just been walking by him, just walking by, and there's this guy laying, and I'm looking at the guy, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't really want to touch him, but I just can't walk by. So yeah, so I go over to him and I look at him, and he is unconscious, and he's shallow breathing, and he is in trouble. So, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And then this woman appears beside me, and she has short hair, shorter than yours, and it was white, not white like blonde, and not white like dyed. It was white. It isn't gray. It was white. And I was looking at the guy on the ground, and I just sort of looked at her, and then I called the 911. And well, I asked the guy, was he all right? And he, snorted or something. And then the woman that was standing beside me, she said, his airways are his airways are blocked, but he can breathe a little bit. His mouth is closed, and he's breathing through his nose, and his eyes have rolled back into the back of his head. And, then the 911 operator comes on and says, fire, ambulance, or police. And I say ambulance. And she said, what's the problem? And I said, there's a guy here. And I described what was going on by what the woman beside me said. And then the woman, the 911 operator said, okay, Robert, would you just go up to him and look at him, please? And would you just count his breaths for me? And I'm counting them, and I say, she said, start now and then stop. And I said, 7. The woman said, beside me said there were 8. So I said, there's 8. And then the 911 operator said, could you just get a little bit closer to this guy and get a closer look for me? And I lean close and I say, well, this guy smells like a brewery. He is really drunk. The woman with the white hair said, yes, he is, but there's something else. And I say, okay. And then the 911 operator said, so now, Robert, what I want you to do is put your hand behind his neck and put your other hand on his forehead and lift his neck up a bit. And he started to breathe. And so just before I did that, and I had a brand new iPhone, just before I did that, the woman with the white hair said, I'll hold your phone. And I gave it to her. And then because I needed, both hands to hold the guy's head. And then that had only been going on for a minute or two at most. And then the fire truck and the ambulances arrived. And as soon as the paramedics arrived, I just got out of the way. The woman handed me the phone, and I went back to speak to the paramedic, and then I turned back and the woman was gone. And as soon as that happened, and the paramedics were there, I just started walking home. And I started walking, and I was walking, and I was walking, and I walk, and I'm thinking, okay, so I live at 1591, and I am at 2000, 2200, and I'm thinking, I don't recognize any of the houses here. And I realized that I wasn't walking southward, I was walking northward. I was on the wrong side of the street. And I don't know how I got there. So I turned around, started walking back, because I should have been on the east side walking south. And, I get to where the guy was and the paramedics. And when I got there, he was sitting up and he was breathing. And I said to him, wow, glad to see you. You look a whole lot better than when I just saw you a while ago. And the paramedic said he was having a fentanyl overdose. Oh. And she said, had you not have called 911, he would have died. So I walked down the street a little bit more and crossed over and got to my place. And the next morning, I thought he was also, like pretty close to the main street. And it turned out that he was like on the wrong side, the different side of the street, northbound. And he was a long way away, a long way. And there I was. And, things like that happen regularly.
Do you think it was a real person, the woman with the white hair? Or she was a drop-in like an angel, giving you that information?
Yeah, maybe that one.
Very, very interesting. Robert, if people want to get hold of you for a reading or for something,
or see my podcast,
okay. How do they, I want to know two things. Firstly, tell them how they can get hold of you for a reading.
Okay. You can find me on my website, www.robertlindsay.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
And if they want to follow your podcast?
My podcast is called My Side of the Crystal Ball. You've been on it. And yours is one of the highest rated shows. By the way, you had the highest number of listeners and responses, second highest, I think. And you can find my podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts are shown. And you can, did I say TikTok and Facebook?
Yeah. If they want it, it's www.robert, LINDSY
MILNE,
MILNE, not MILN. And also I'll put the details underneath. Thanks. I can't believe the time. Do you know that we've been talking for an hour and a half?
No kidding. It just felt like I said hello.
It's like 12:30 here. And we started at 11 o'clock. I mean, when you and I chat, we just chat and chat and chat. So what I really would like to say to the audience is that I've come to know about Robert because Alba Weinman had a reading with Robert, and she recommended Robert to me. I then thought, wow, if Alba, because she's got high standards, Alba, and I thought if it's good enough for Alba, then he's got to be good enough for me. So I then had a reading with Robert and just fell in love with him, and his just gentle nature and his compassion, and he's so generous of spirit. And so I then recommended him to quite a few people, and not one of them has had a bad experience. So if you're really needing help in your life, he's also a life coach. Wow, I just I just think absolutely, give it a go. He's got all these years of experience and such great knowledge. And that's why I wanted to bring him back, because I didn't want to bring Robert back for Robert as such, because Robert doesn't need you to contact him. He's got lots of people that are contacting him. I want you to contact Robert for you,
Wow.
so that you can get a clearer path for your life, because he is life changing. And that's why I do the work I do, because I want to make a difference. I think Robert and I, that's what we want to do, don't we? We just want to be of service.
In my thinking, I'm interested in the person in front of me.
Yes.
And that's my main focus.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll definitely
And
do
like
this
a lot
again.
of us, like most of us that do this work, we're hardwired differently than others. Our instinct is, what can I do, rather than what can I get? Oh, what can go wrong with that? But yeah, so that's how a lot of us are wired. Our instinct is, what can I give? What can I do? Rather than what will I get?
I've got to quickly share something with you before we
Sure.
go as such. Alba's been telling me for a while, and Michelle as well, that I should do readings.
So do readings.
But I've always been too nervous to. I did a
Take
few.
a take a lorazepam. Do a reading.
So I've done a few, but I've
Good for
never
you.
charged, because I was too nervous that, what if they were wrong? But Robert, I've got to tell you something. What really thrilled me, is on Monday I had I facilitated a hypnosis session for somebody. This most beautiful, gentle energy, this lady. And as I was interviewing her before the session started, I started seeing this in my mind. And I said to her, well, look, I've got this message for you.
Hmm.
You're actually going to be writing a book. And it's going to be about Mother Mary, because Mother Mary's going to come through you. She's going to give you all these downloads and this information. But I'm being told that it has to be a book, a very, very special notebook. And you've got to get a lovely pen, because it's going to be a holy communion. It's a holy communication. And on the cover it's like botanical and leaves and things. And she said, hold on. And she leaned over to her bedside table. And she showed me, look at this. And it was a leather bound journey with all the leaves and the tree and everything.
Yeah.
And in the front was a female form. And I thought, wow. And then after the session yesterday, she got hold of me and she said to me, I did as you said, and I've already received 2.5 pages.
Wow.
And it showed in the session that she's going to have people queuing up around the corner for that book, because
Wow.
the words are going to be so uplifting. So, that thrilled me, that just came through like that. And Michelle said, you see, you should be doing this. But it's
Robert's
not
saying, you see, you can be doing this.
it's
I didn't
always the
say
doubt,
should.
isn't it?
You
The
can.
doubt.
Well, then just do it.
Like you going on and saying, I wonder if I can do it on the telephone. Oh, I wonder if I can do it on the radio.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And just do it.
That's why I said you're brave.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I didn't think of it as brave. I just thought of it as what I needed to do.
Well, I don't need to do the readings, you see.
Yeah, but you want to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
You
Because
want? Come on! I could look at you. Come on.
okay, so I'll start like you did. I'll practice on friends first again, shall I? To get some courage.
Okay. So being psychic,
Yes.
and just about everybody can be psychic. What you do is pay attention to what's obvious. Look at the person. Just look at them. not like an ogle or stare, but look at them and see them. See their face and their eyes, and see their hair and their body. Not like in assessing, just see them and look at them and see them. See what's obvious about them. When you become aware of what's obvious, then more becomes obvious. And then absorb that obvious. And then when you see that's obvious, then even more becomes obvious. And then more becomes obvious, and more until what seems obvious to you is not obvious to others.
Mm.
So become aware of what's obvious and just expand it, and take steps, just expand it. And you will be tuning in. So just look at the person. You use all of your senses, touch, taste, all right, within reason. Like, don't go grappling people. Well, maybe you could. I tell him not to do that. But get in touch with the your senses: touch, taste, smell, feel. Touch, taste, smell, hear, see. Get in touch with them. Use your eyes. Use your, use everything, all your awareness. And when you use all of those senses, they come together and create a sixth sense. And we then have extra sensory perception. So be natural. Use all of your senses, focus on what's obvious, and then watch how much more becomes obvious.
So you've always done your, okay, but you see, you weren't doing those readings like that because you didn't even see those people.
Well, okay.
So if it's online,
Yes,
nowadays it's online.
Okay, so that was when I was like about 25. I'd been experimenting for 10 years.
But that was, remember, you doing the readings one-on-one with all the ladies of the night, etc. But then when you were doing them over the radio and over the telephone, you couldn't see those people in front of you.
But I first practiced doing them just on the radio or on the phone by myself, one-on-one. And I also, when I was doing I still do in-person appointments, and even to this very day, what I do is I become aware of what's obvious. I look at the person. So you look at the person, become aware of what's obvious, and then more becomes obvious. Now, when
you were doing that without the person in front of you, so you couldn't see what was obvious. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, but you're going to start with some people in front of you.
The few I've done, they haven't been in front of me.
Okay, then do it your way. But in the meantime, it would be, so you didn't see them. Well, in the meantime, they
were like on the radio. Like for you, they were on the radio on the other side. Okay. For me, they had somewhere else in the world.
Okay.
So I'm thinking it's good if they may be in front of me.
Just to get started.
Okay,
just
so
to
Robert,
get started.
That was my thing. To me, you were like a real psychic, right? And
yes.
For me, I didn't consider myself to be like a psychic, labels again, because although I can do it just sitting down and saying, tell me what Robert needs to know at this time, and it all comes out.
You do
and then
that?
I don't even know what I'm writing, and then I look at it and it's this 2-page.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
But I would love to do it your way. That's why I was so chuffed on Monday when suddenly I just started seeing all these things and realized it was a message for her. So, I mean, although it's for a client, it's so fabulous to be able to get that information and share it. I mean, I loved it.
So do I.
To me, it's a
glorious. It's glorious.
It is glorious.
It's adorning.
It's so fulfilling. Absolutely. It's so I'd rather do that than anything. Yeah, I'd seriously, hey, it's just,
I have. It's true.
yeah. So, Robert,
Yes.
thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you for this.
It's
I
great.
know how busy you are, and I know we were
I
going to
always
have a
have time
private
for
chat,
you.
and you said let's just have the private chat on the thingy. Why not? And
Well, you wanted, come on, you wanted me to come on the
I think
program.
people will.
And
They love you.
okay, you wanted me to, and I'd been thinking about it had been a while since we talked. So
So that was kind of you.
yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Until next time.
Yes,
Any words you would like to share with the audience before our
yep,
next chat?
yes. My podcast, My Side of the Crystal Ball, I always end it this way. And it's do good, stay safe, and above all, just be kind.
Oh, that's lovely. So, everybody listening, remember that's Robert's favorite. Be kind. In a world full of nonsense at the moment, just be kind. And thank you so much for listening. Take care. Lots of love. Cheers.